don't put too much stress on your first kiss. It'll happen, but like it gets better, more funnier, and like
yeah. And it only gets magical if you're actually in love with the person, like later on after you've kissed them a lot. But usually the first kiss.
True. I prefer women, but I want a guy to force himself on me. I am open to trans women doing the same, but I don't see too many of them wanting. Oh, some of them do like work off the side because like some of them are actually sex workers. So like there's never a shortage for someone to take a nice 40-year-old hairy man aside and take him. just really take him.
Is one last kiss, but she won't let me have it. I want to get over her, but I can't. I need help. Hey, this is Morgan Rector. Join me and my co-host Rosanna Chilton for the Confession Post podcast. ConfessionPost.com is a website where users post highly personal content anonymously for the reading pleasure of other users. On this podcast, Rosanna and I read confessions from the site and give our analysis. You can listen to the Confession Post podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I am Rachel Telfor.
And I'm Michelle Gower.
We are the hosts of a new true crime podcast.
It is called Children of the Void.
The Void refers to children who are missing.
And children who have died under mysterious and suspicious circumstances.
Sometimes parents know nothing about what has happened to their child.
And sometimes they seem to know more than they let on.
Like Casey Anthony.
And the John Benet Ramsey case.
We are determined to do our part to find missing children.
And the truth when the story of their disappearance doesn't hold up.
Together, we will blast the shadows with light so that no more children disappear into the void.
Children of the Void debuts in September.
Join us so we can all make a difference.
Please subscribe.
Until then, I'm Rachel Telfor.
And I'm Michelle Gower.
You can catch Children of the Void on Apple, Spotify, YouTube,
and everywhere else you get your podcasts.
Hi guys, thanks for listening. Thank you as well to those of you who donate to the Patreon account. I've launched a campaign to raise funds to buy a new iMac. My current computer has been in use for over 8 years, and it is affecting my ability to create new content. As previously stated, my Patreon account can be found at www.patreon, that's patreon.com/Leader1, Leaderone. For those of you who would prefer to make a one-time single donation, there is also the option to send money to my PayPal account. The email address to send it to is Morgan Rector, my last name spelled Rector, 331, Morgan Rector 331 at hotmail.com. Remember, any amount is fine. If $1 one time is all you wish to donate, it would be gratefully accepted. Thank you for all your support, whatever forms it has taken. Enjoy the show. Welcome to Human Monsters. Griselda Blanco Restrepo was born in Cartagena, Bolivar, Colombia, on February 15, 1943, to Ana Lucia Black and Roberto, a waitress and port worker, respectively. Roberto died when Griselda was still a toddler. Griselda began to run afoul of the law at an early age. She didn't know better, since her mother did not exactly set an example worth emulating. Anna would turn to prostitution to make ends meet when left with no alternative. She also became an alcoholic, leaving aside just enough money to prevent herself and Griselda from starving. Anna had a conversation with Griselda that would inform the young girl's view of the world markedly. Anna, you know, my daughter, we women, we were designed by God to enlighten the world and to provide all the heat He needs to provide. We are as a flame that burns without saying anything, without complaining, merely doing what it was designed for. We suffer, but we accept our fate, because we know that our flame gives light to those who have nothing. Griselda, Mom, why do men have no heat in their hearts? Anna, because men are hard and much more near the animals than God. Once upon a time, women were considered equal to gods as goddesses. And then one day, Christianity arrived and decreased the role of women by limiting it to that of ownership of the men. Griselda, who is Eve? Anna, Eve was the wife of Adam, the first man on earth, created by God, but who, supposedly, pushed Adam to eat the apple that God asked him not to eat. Griselda, why did he eat it? Anna, because he wanted to, simply. Adam didn't need Eve to eat the forbidden fruit, but the church, which didn't blame Adam to have broken his pact with God, did place all the blame on Eve. Since then, we women are condemned to work to fix this offense. Anna lost her job waiting tables. She kept the job because of the sexual favors she provided for her boss. He had his fill of that. He also had his fill of her problem drinking, which took a toll on her appearance. Anna became a full-time prostitute because there was no one else to provide for her and her daughter. Her father was very ill, and there was no money left for his care, which put additional pressure on her in her role as breadwinner. One day Griselda grilled her mother about what she was doing to earn money, as detailed in the following exchange. Anna, since you were born, my daughter, I do the work I can find, and there is little work that is given to a woman. Then, I do the work that I do, even if it doesn't make me happy. Griselda, there are some boys in my school who say that you're selling to men. Anna, you know, my daughter, I have 3 mouths to feed, and it's just me who works and brings money to eat. So you tell these idiots that they take care of their business, and if they have something to tell me, that they come to me. Griselda wasn't satisfied by these answers, and the bullying at school continued. A few months later, she questioned Anna again about her choice of vocation. Anna, you know, my daughter, there is a greater misery than the condition of the people. Griselda, why, Mom? Anna, the poverty of the heart, my daughter. People think that a woman who is successful with men is a woman of easy virtue because she would sell her body for money. But a woman sells not more for the money that a married woman offers because it would have received a gift from her husband. It is the same thing except that a woman of easy virtue does voluntarily as does the married woman. The only difference is that the married woman does with her husband while we, women who like men, do so with men we want. Griselda, and what's better, Mom, do with her husband or with other men? Anna, that, my daughter, you'll find when you get older. But if you must one day be ashamed of what others think, then you won't live for you. You'll live to the eyes of others. Just know that you can decide yourself what is right and what is not. In any case, if men make you gifts, whether jewelry or money, take everything you can until the last peso. Griselda's grandmother regularly contradicted Anna, feeling that the things she was teaching Griselda about prostitution were inappropriate and incorrect. Her grandmother died when Griselda was 8 years old. Without the sober second thought of her grandmother, Griselda had questions for her mother about her moral code. Anna, in the world we live, my daughter, a woman's place is to serve men. Men consider themselves as superior to women, and do consider us as objects meant to serve or satisfy them. That goes whether it's a mundane request or something more vulgar. Griselda, men are that bad? Anna, this isn't wickedness, my daughter. Men are human beings primarily. A stupid man will consider a woman as a simple object without taking the trouble to consider a woman noteworthy. This is our environment that wants it. Maybe in the big world, things are different. When I see the capable people who manage this country, I don't think they are better. At the age of 10, Griselda was aware that adolescence and the changes it would bring to her body drew near. Once again, she turned to her mother for guidance. Anna, it means that you become a woman, my daughter, even if you are still just a child. Griselda, a woman, but I am only 10 years old, mother. Anna, remember what the preachers say. We inherited this Eve. Griselda, her again. Anna, yes, my daughter, women are made to suffer, all because God told Eve she will give birth in pain. Griselda, still because of her? Anna, no, not her daughter, because of God. After her mother gave her a distorted worldview, Griselda's perspective of life took another pivotal turn at the age of 11. Griselda began to date a local boy known as Joaquim. He was a small-time criminal and the leader of a sect of a Medellin street gang. Once Griselda became his girlfriend, she took full advantage of the power and prestige this affiliation afforded her. This continued until Joaquim was charged and convicted for robbery. He was incarcerated in a juvenile detention center. It was a painful experience for Griselda, though it led to her becoming hard-hearted rather than to chronic victimhood. Remembering how Joaquim got respect and deference with the use of an iron fist, she knew exactly what to do when she encountered defiance from one of the members of the gang. She stabbed the boy in the stomach. Griselda said, "You think that because I'm a girl you're going to get rid of me?" She spat in his face. The boy, 13, said, "Forgiveness, Griselda, forgiveness. I didn't know you'd be so strong. Now I respect you and I'll never do it again, I swear." Griselda said, "So you listen to me." She turned to the other boys. She said, "And you others too. In the absence of Joaquim, it's me who runs the band. This idiot thought that I won't be at the top. Evil took him. He's just lucky I didn't kill him. Otherwise, I would have planted my blade in his heart. But the next will not have a second chance." From that day forward, none of the males in her gang questioned her authority. She reorganized the gang and made the crucial decisions. She assigned territories where they would operate. She sorted out how they would make money and how it would be handled. She also rechristened the gang. She called it the Debilucos. Translated into English, they were called the Weaklings. Naturally, this struck the members of the gang as an odd choice for a street gang. Such an operation was supposed to profit from intimidation. who would be intimidated by a gang called the Weaklings. The membership preferred names like the Lords or the Kings. Griselda tried but failed to convey that Debilicos was a Trojan horse of a name. She felt that if someone underestimated their strength, they would be caught off guard and thereby vulnerable when they incurred their wrath. Griselda soon realized it would not be with these numbskulls that she would achieve anything significant in life. She wanted to be a somebody, and those losers would only have brought her down into the morass of ineptitude. The necessity to earn money became more pressing than ever. Anna's alcoholism was taking a toll on her body. She was now missing teeth, and she had lost her looks. Any man willing to run the risk of getting caught with a prostitute wasn't willing to do so with a woman who looked like Anna. She was damaged goods, and it showed. Griselda dropped out of school. The way she saw it, she would learn everything she needed to know to earn money and survive outside of school. The faculty had taught her to read, write, and do basic math. That was all she felt she needed. She would undergo her scholarship in the School of Hard Knocks, and she was determined to graduate with honors. Anna feared that Griselda was not coming by her money honestly. She assumed that Griselda was earning money as a prostitute. Such a position of servitude did not appeal to Griselda at all. Griselda had her first taste of power, and it was something she would never relinquish voluntarily. The pesos began to roll in by the bundle. Due to the actions and directions of the Madre, as the gang called her, the boys began to make more money. She found ways to maximize profit while minimizing risk. About this, they were disinclined to complain. Griselda read the newspaper every day. She would peruse the news section to help her dream up new schemes to make money. One article detailed a kidnapping. The son of a wealthy industrialist was abducted, and the kidnappers freed him after receiving a large ransom. They were never caught and went on to increasing infamy and wealth. Griselda found this idea very appealing. She would find it very easy to sleep at night, whilst extorting money from the middle-class locals, who were charging the poor for the food they were growing. The way she saw it, it was counter-exploitation. She did her homework. She went into all the retail shops to familiarize herself with the owners. She went as far as to follow some of them all the way to their homes. Satisfied that her intelligence-gathering operation was complete, she drew up plans for her first abduction. First things first, she needed the right tools to do the job. A knife just wasn't going to cut it. She needed a gun for this. People take guns seriously. She bought one from a pimp. The pimp was another of the long line of men who did not take Griselda seriously because she was a woman. Pimp, you want a gun. And what do you want to do with it? It's not a toy, little girl. Griselda, I have money to pay if you want to sell me one. Pimp, then give me 500,000 pesos and I'll bring it back. Griselda, you think I'm going to give the money before? Pimp, if you don't have confidence, then go to hell, small girl. Griselda, show me the gun and I'll bring you money. After a pause for reflection, the pimp showed Griselda the gun he had on his person. Pimp, it will be the same as this one. 500,000 pesos. Don't forget. Griselda, I'll bring it to you in an hour, but I will not be alone. If you ever want to rip me off, my friends will take care of you. She remembered her mother saying to her, men think they are superior to women. Don't ever forget that. Griselda returned to meet with the pimp a half hour later. She was suspicious of him. She wondered if some kind of ambush was afoot. It wasn't exactly reassuring that his criminal associates were loitering in his homestead when she arrived. Pimp, You're already here, little girl? Griselda, you got the gun? Pimp, look, little girl. She hated being addressed as little girl, but she kept her indignation to herself. It was time for negotiation. She asked to have a look at the gun. She held it in her hands. She caressed it. The rush she felt while fondling this instrument of death was empowering, intoxicating. Griselda, how many bullets in the charger? Pimp, 15. It should be enough for you, no? Griselda, that's enough for now. She handed the cash to the pimp. Griselda, 500,000 pesos. And if I need another one, you will make for me a price? Pimp, it's already a good price. Griselda, we'll see. She took a few steps backward while careful not to turn her back on the pimp and his cronies. She gave a signal for her subordinates to appear. The pimp was amused that an 11-year-old girl would handle this so well. The Debilicos were thrilled that they would no longer debase themselves by pickpocketing. It was not they who handled the gun, however. For the gang's first kidnapping, 2 of the thugs waited outside of a school for their kidnapping target to emerge. They cornered him and threatened to cut him with their knives if he did not follow them. They took him to an abandoned garage. They gagged him because he had been screaming. A letter was sent to the father of the boy. It notified him that if he ever wanted to see his son alive again, he was to personally drop 5 million pesos to the address provided. The money was given to one of Griselda's minions. The father reported the boy who acted as an intermediary when he dropped off the money. He was unaware of who orchestrated the operation. Griselda and the Debilicos celebrated his success by passing around a bottle of brandy. Griselda drank a single beer. She had witnessed the destructive power of alcohol in her mother's example, and she didn't want to follow her down that road. Griselda was so elated, she already formulated a plan for continued success, as determined in her announcement to the boys. It's our first success, and given the speed at which the trader has brought money, it means that the ransom was not important enough. Next time, he will pay 10 million pesos. The next day, the son of a well-to-do shopkeeper was kidnapped. He was kept in a different location than the first boy. The father gave the Debilicos the ransom they demanded, but he reported them to the police the next day, defying their warning not to. The police told him that another merchant had been extorted in the same fashion. They notified all business owners in the area that they and their children were at risk for being targeted by these criminals. Despite these actions, Griselda and the Debilicos managed to kidnap and extort another 10 million pesos. Still, noticing that the police were on to the offenders, Griselda came up with a plan to protect her meal ticket. She approached the first boy who was kidnapped. She said to him, "Your father has reported us to the police. So, to punish him, he will have to pay a new ransom." Advised by police not to pay the ransom, the father refused. The next day, Griselda dispatched one of the Debilicos to the boy's home to collect the ransom. He came back empty-handed. He was in a panic. Griselda had to reformulate her plan. She racked her brain to come up with a solution. She took the tack of contacting the parents personally. She was eager to dump the boy and get her payday. Otherwise, he had become a burden to her. She called from a payphone. When the father answered, she said, "Sir, you decided to not pay in exchange for the life of your son. I warn you that if tonight you don't bring us 10 million pesos, I will kill your son." The boy's parents were hesitant. They didn't know what to do. Paying the initial ransom placed them in a position of considerable financial hardship. The police notified them that the offenders did not have credibility. They felt they were amateurs and likely teenagers. The police didn't feel they would take the risk of murdering a child. The entire town would be howling for their blood. Criminals operate most effectively in a cloak of anonymity. The phone rang again, and the father told the intermediary that he would not pay the ransom. He proposed that he collect his son in person to prove he had no personal grudge against them. The caller hung up. The father asked the police if this was a good sign. They told him that this scenario would leave the offenders with their backs against the wall. As a result, there would be no recourse but to release his son. Griselda was apoplectic. The boy was lying on an old, stained mattress. Griselda put a bullet in the chamber of her gun. She said to the boy, "Your parents love you less than their money." She fired a warning shot. The Debilicos lived up to their name when they jumped at the sound. Griselda said to the boy, "Now they will know how much interest to pay." One of the Debilicos said, "The police are going to come after us." Fearless as always, Griselda said, "Shut up." She promised them that the outcome would be similar as with the other abductions. She reassured them that the police and the boy's family would cooperate and she would get her money. As she walked away, the Debilicos were skeptical that she could pull it off. They were in awe of her. They were astonished that she would hatch such a risky and audacious plan. 2 days later, Griselda went to the Bolivar place. The rendezvous she arranged with the Debilicos did not come to pass. They were too cowardly to take such a risk. It didn't concern her. The way she saw it, she would end up with their slice of the action. Griselda got her ransom money, but it was quickly depleted. Her mother drank most of the profits. Anna's drinking began to drive a wedge between them. Griselda became more of a parental authority than Anna. She certainly outdid her as a provider. That role reversal was not adequate for Anna to see her daughter as an authority figure, though. They had a conversation one day about this realignment in power that led first to an argument and then to a brawl. Slaps turned to punches, and the destruction of the mother-daughter bond was underway, with cracks forming at the foundation. Things went from bad to worse. Anna brought a prostitution client home. The money was sorely needed. This transaction would be different, however, as reflected in Anna's introduction of Griselda. "This is my daughter. Look how pretty she is." She was serious. She wanted her daughter to become a prostitute. She also intended to bring that turn of events about through force, if necessary. The man, 30 years old, walked up to Griselda, who was sitting in a chair. He touched her hair and stroked her cheek. He looked over at Anna. He said, 300,000 pesos? Anna said, 300,000, yes. The man gave the money to Anna. She showed him to the room where he was to be serviced. He grabbed Griselda by the hand and yanked her out of the chair. She did not protest. There Griselda was, 12 years old and in bed with a 30-year-old man. Joaquim was only 2 years older than she, and in the prime of his physical condition. She lost her virginity to him, so she wasn't exactly a rookie in the bedroom. The man she was to service was considerably older and hairier. She found him repulsive. He was disappointed in his own right. He preferred child rape victims who were sexually inexperienced. When he realized she wasn't a virgin, he was outraged. He confronted Anna. "You told me that your daughter was a virgin." Anna, "Of course she is." Man, liar. "You get 200,000 pesos. Anna, you better give me 300,000. Otherwise what? The man slapped Anna so hard she flew back against a table. He concluded by saying, 200,000 is what you get. Anna was furious. She had lost 100,000 pesos because her 12-year-old daughter lost her virginity. She stormed into the room where Griselda still lay. She said, "Little bitch, here, take this." She beat Griselda as retaliation for the lost money and for the slap she received from the John. This was not the only time Griselda was trafficked by Anna. Anna was hideous by this point, and no discount was enticing enough for a man to waste his money on her. This operation went on for years. Anna would have her daily bottle of brandy, and if Griselda had to be sold to pedophiles so they could gratify themselves as they saw fit, it was all right with her. During Griselda's 14th year, she hit a breaking point. She could no longer tolerate the beatings her mother inflicted on her. She kept the gun she bought during her days leading the Debilicos. She was going to press it into the face of her mother if she so much as slapped her one more time. Sure enough, that day came. Griselda stuck her revolver in her mother's face. Her mother was not someone who loved life. She drowned in a bottle of brandy and lived her life at the bottom of the bottle. She had nothing else to live for, and the misery she felt left her with nothing to look forward to. She conveyed to her daughter that she was not at all intimidated. "You want to kill me, my daughter? Then go ahead and kill me. Finish this once and for all. You think I'm afraid of death? Well, you're wrong, my dear. Death, I welcome it every day since your father died. So go ahead and kill me and free me from this unworthy life." Griselda could not bring herself to pull the trigger. She knew how much her mother had suffered. One day when Anna was falling down drunk, Griselda gathered some of her belongings and ran away from home. She had no place to go, but anywhere would be better than to put up with her mother's antics and the prostitution into which she had been forced. Griselda always got half of the money from her Johns. She had enough money to rent a room. She supported herself with prostitution, though it was on her terms this time around, so she was less of a victim. Griselda turned 18 on February 15th, 1961. Not only was she now a legal adult, but she met a boy who offered a healthier relationship than she enjoyed with most men. His name was Carlos Trujillo. He was 20 years old and a mechanic. Though he was aware she had been a prostitute for years, he was still sweet on her. He felt empathy for her when she explained how her mother forced her into prostitution. He was the first man she brought to her bedroom without financial compensation. He offered her a legitimate, respectable life. He helped her get a job as a waitress. This he required as a term for continuing the relationship. She didn't protest. He had only the best of intentions for her. He was good for her. After a few months of courtship, Carlos proposed marriage. They moved in together in a small apartment. Griselda became pregnant a few months later. They had a son. He was christened Dixon, an American name that Carlos found appealing. A year later, she gave birth to her second son, this one named Uber, the German word for above. This choice of name was also attributed to Carlos. They were forced to move now that they had two small children on the premises. Griselda's efforts to balance work with the care and education of her boys were challenging, but she was determined she would give them a better life than she had with their grandmother. Nevertheless, both Griselda and Carlos were happy. Their life was perfect as far as they were concerned. Carlos qualified for an advancement in his professional qualifications, and he was able to open his own auto body repair garage. He worked long hours to provide a comfortable life for his family. He asked Griselda to retire from waiting tables to become a full-time mother and homemaker. Eventually, problems began to emerge in their marriage. Carlos often spent more time on his motorcycles than he did with his family. He also developed a drinking problem, since many of his customers sometimes gave him alcohol in lieu of money. He would come home intoxicated, which frustrated Griselda, as if Anna hadn't victimized her enough with her own problem drinking. Griselda placed all the blame for the deteriorating state of their marriage at his feet, and they fought frequently. They had a third child, another boy. This time Griselda chose the name, a Spanish name, Osvaldo. Not only did Carlos not support her during the pregnancy, he didn't even turn up at the maternity ward while she was giving birth. As if that weren't bad enough, when she returned home, she discovered to her horror that he was with another woman. She was the secretary he hired to attend to clerical duties. Carlos was no longer the man Griselda married. Griselda was enraged. She confronted him one day. Griselda gave Carlos some time to decide between his wife and his secretary. She also outlined a way to avenge this betrayal. Her vision for the next chapter of her life began to come into focus. She took available funds from a cash hoard they kept in a small wooden box and left. Griselda returned to the bar where she met Carlos. His mother approached her with a cash offer to divorce Carlos and sign over full custody of the children to him. She signed it, and that part of her life was over. She was 22 years old and still attractive. She capitalized on this by waiting tables. Like her mother had, she slept with the proprietor until he lost interest in her. She was promptly dismissed. Griselda went back to sex work to support herself. She no longer saw in men the potential to find love and a meaningful relationship. She recalled what her mother told her. Men see women as just something to serve their appetite, good to be consumed, a hole to be filled. At the age of 24, Griselda met another man who had more to offer than a quick payday for fleeting pleasures. His name was Alberto Bravo. He introduced himself as a tourism officer. He claimed to work for a travel agency that showed Colombia and Panama to American tourists. After Griselda and Alberto became intimate, he revealed his true occupation to her. Alberto was a smuggler. His specialty was illegal immigration. He did work in the tourism field in Colombia and Panama, but not long enough to become an officer. He helped Latin Americans emigrate to the United States. Alberto and Griselda fell in love. He asked her to collaborate with him in the illegal immigration business. And being that this prospect was infinitely more attractive than turning tricks, she agreed. Having doubled his efforts as a team, they profited well from this endeavor, and Griselda was elevated to a lifestyle with which she had theretofore been unfamiliar. She was now firmly embedded in the middle class. Alberto proposed that they move to the United States. He wanted to live in New York City. He told her that they would marry first. They had saved $20,000 American dollars, which would provide a soft landing until they found work. Remarkably, Griselda passed Carlos Trujillo while walking down a New York street with Alberto one day. He fled Colombia after failing to pay back a loan. He was involved with organized crime. Griselda worried about what had become of her children back in Colombia, since he didn't bring the boys with him. This was no happy reunion. She wanted to avenge what Carlos had done to her. She asked Alberto to help her get her vengeance. He tried to dissuade her. She was headstrong. To quote Griselda, Trust me, I'll take care of that bastard. Just find me a weapon and I'll be done with him. Alberto was caught off guard by this. Given her line of work, she was no model citizen, this is true, but to murder the head of a gang of Puerto Rican thugs with Italian Mafia protection? He wondered if she was crazy or just tougher than he ever imagined. Griselda wouldn't give up on her campaign to rid the neighborhood of her ex-husband. Her urge to purge was fierce enough that she approached a local kingpin about the matter. Griselda, you and me, we have a common enemy. Kingpin, I don't see who you mean, ma'am. I have no enemies in this neighborhood. The kingpin played dumb because for all he knew, Griselda could have been an undercover cop. Griselda, you have an enemy called Carlos Trujillo. This man is a pebble in your shoe. Before it causes you an injury, I suggest you get rid of it. Kingpin, ah yes, and how are you doing? In stifling between your big boobs? The kingpin did not take her seriously, obviously. He looked her up and down, admiring her breasts. He turned to his bodyguards and laughed. Griselda was not swayed by this. Griselda, I'll get rid of this man and I'll report back to you. At that point, you will pay me what you decide. She turned on her heels and left. When she arrived home, she told Alberto what she had done. Alberto, my poor Griselda, you became crazy, my word. You think you're going to liquidate Carlos and his minions will let you do it without reacting? Griselda, my love, trust me. I beg you, find me a gun, and I'm going to kill this man for what he did to me. That's 8 years that I have not heard from my children. Twice I tried to approach them in Medellin. Twice he did send some hitmen who came to threaten me at the door of my hotel room. Alberto, you need to forget it, honey, before misfortune befalls us. Griselda, this opportunity that arises is sent to me by our Madonna. How can you believe in coincidence? The world is big, so big, that we meet here in New York, in the same neighborhood. What other explanation can you give it? By now, Alberto knew her well enough that once she made up her mind to do something, nothing and no one could deviate her from her course. As far as they were both concerned, she already had blood on her hands. Griselda executed her plan. She invited Carlos to join her in a hotel room. She knew he would not pass up the opportunity to fornicate with her. He was used to having complete control over her, which he would also enjoy. 2 days later, the dead body of Carlos Trujillo was found by hotel staff. He had been shot 3 times. Griselda reported back to the kingpin, having made good on her vow to put Carlos in a body bag. This time she brought Alberto with her. Kingpin, so what do you want as a payment for your work? We are from Medellin, in Colombia, and we know people who can provide you with a locally manufactured flour. Griselda, flour? I'm not a baker. Kingpin, Colombian flour, señorita. If you're interested, we can bring you some and give you a taste. If you find it to your liking, you have to pay us for it at the market price. Griselda, I demand to see it. Bring me a kilo. That's enough for a taste. By Colombian flour, the kingpin was not referring to materials with which Griselda could bake bread and pastries. He was referring to cocaine. This was her first time dealing with the Mafia. 1968 was to be the year that changed everything in her life. Griselda and Alberto returned to Colombia. They were looking for a source of cocaine production, and after some networking, they found a manufacturer. They weren't ready to start up a large-scale production operation just yet. First, they wanted to taste the manufacturer's product. Nothing sells like quality, after all. They bought a kilogram. They told him they would come back for more if he could give them a discount. After returning to their hotel, Griselda began to design plans for smuggling cocaine into the United States. She cut the package into 2 500-gram bags. She put them into each cup of her brassiere. Alberto, how did you get this idea? Griselda, you asked me on the plane what I used to read those magazines that you thought were ridiculous. Like this, you see that my readings were not so ridiculous. They passed through customs without incident and returned to their apartment in Queens. She undressed and repackaged the cocaine to bring the volume back to 1 kilogram. When Griselda and Alberto returned to the kingpin with the kilo in hand, the man was impressed. That they could bring the item back in 3 days was atypical. Griselda, we are a group of Colombians who work in New York, and, as we regularly go back with us to see our family and bring them money in order to live, we can bring back all the goods you need. Kingpin, and that is what tells me that you don't work for the police, and you're not a fucking rat? Griselda, you think that I am the type who would work with the police? If this is the case, then leave it at that. If you are not interested in my merchandise, I'll sell it to someone else. There is no lack of customers in New York. She was not willing to negotiate with him over the price. She wanted him to know that she was no pushover. When she got up to leave, the kingpin put his hand on the kilo to halt her departure. Griselda, you see me maybe as a weak woman, but don't forget that it's me who put 3 bullets into the head of Carlos Trujillo. And killing does not scare me, so either you take my goods at the market price or you give it to me. It only took one look into Griselda's eyes to assure the kingpin that she was serious. Alberto slipped his hand into his jacket pocket to place his hand on the gun he was carrying. The kingpin had muscle, but they made it clear that they had strength of their own, and they weren't afraid to use it. Kingpin, there is no reason to get excited, but I don't have enough money on me to pay you for a kilo. Griselda, so send someone looking for it. Your minions must be used for something, no? You know the market price? Me too. I'm staying with you the time that we bring you the money. Kingpin, Giacomo, bring a double coffee to Signor and Signorita. Pietro, come here. After speaking in Italian to Pietro, the kingpin turned back to Griselda. Kingpin, my friend will bring the money. I will pay you for your kilo. Griselda, thank you. The kingpin noticed that Griselda's hands didn't shake. She may have been a rookie in the drug trade, but she wasn't intimidated. Kingpin, you told me that you could get more. Griselda, as much as you need. But this has a cost, and we have to make it gradually, if you see what I mean. Kingpin, I see very good, yes. This for a kilo a week. Would that be a good start? Griselda, let's go for a kilo a week to start. After a month, we'll proceed to 2 kilos. Kingpin, done deal. Griselda and Alberto resumed their drug smuggling operation. They began to alter the trafficking details to make it more difficult to track their movements. Griselda did not want to be a mule forever. She came up with an idea to ensure this fate would not be sealed. She approached prostitutes in her hometown who were eager to move on from sex work. Griselda met with tailors to make special bras that provided a roomier fit in the cups. She also met with a pimp who was already aware of her reputation. He agreed to supply her with 7 girls every week. Once this operation was firing on all cylinders, Griselda and Alberto were making tens of thousands of dollars a week. Their timing was excellent. Cocaine was not yet classified as a drug in the United States. The government's law enforcement agencies were more focused on busting heroin traffickers. It was going well for the most part, Griselda began to receive complaints from the mules that Alberto was fondling their breasts while helping them put on the bras. He also began to have sexual relations with them. Griselda was furious, but she needed Alberto, so she let it slide. They had been married for 3 years, and now she knew he wasn't much better than the other men with whom she had been intimate. She decided that someday, somehow, she would make him pay. But she had to be careful about it. She had to wait until the day when he would become useless to her. Alberto stayed in Medellin, which provided him with even more opportunities to cheat on her. Griselda stayed in New York. At this point, it was more of a business partnership than a marriage. One day, Griselda was summoned by a Mafia don. She met with him in his limousine. He told her that he had been dealing in heroin but wanted to transition to cocaine since law enforcement had been monitoring him very closely. He had become aware that she was the best cocaine importer in the city. This was a huge opportunity to supply the New York Mafia with all its political and legal protections. It meant she could import cocaine without all the fuss with mules. The money would pile up to the sky. The Don said, "I didn't tell you my name." Griselda said, "I didn't ask for it." The Don said, "I'm John Gotti. I am the godfather of the 6 New York families, and it is with me and me alone that you will deal in this city. But there is a problem, however." Griselda, "Tell me, I might have the solution." Gotti, "One of our friends of Miami also wants to enroll in this business, and he asked us to find someone who could provide at least £4 a week." Griselda, "Miami?" Gotti, "Miami, yes. It is a region where many Americans withdraw to spend their retirement. The aphrodisiac virtues of this medication, if I may say so, they are not familiar with. How can I..." Griselda, "Say no more, Mr. Gotti." Gotti, "Call me John." Griselda, "Don't say no more, John. Tell me only that I should go to provide the goods. You have to deliver the goods to the airport. A man by the name of Roberto will be waiting in a cafeteria called Santo Cristo. You will give him the goods, and you will receive an envelope with the amount that we have specified." Gotti, "And how much will you give me for a kilo?" Griselda, "The same that we will pay you for New York." Gotti, "Give my friendships to Roberto." Griselda's next assignment was to create a network between Colombia and Florida. Griselda moved to Miami. She hated the cold weather of New York, and Miami was a midway point between the destinations and origin points of her product. So it was a good fit. The timing could have been better. It was 1972, the year that President Richard Nixon instigated the war on drugs. 1973. Griselda Blanco met with Pablo Escobar, the infamous king of cocaine. He agreed to become her supplier. He facilitated the processing of coca paste into cocaine powder, and he had the connections to ship it out of the country without incident. This planted the seeds for what would become known in the 1980s as the Medellin Cartel. Alberto's behavior became problematic. As many drug dealers have been warned, you don't get high off your own supply. Whether or not Alberto received this caution, he was indulging himself in his operations inventory. He continued to indulge himself, buying a mansion for himself. He told Griselda it was to live without the monitoring of the police and to enjoy nature. She didn't believe him. He opened up some legitimate businesses, like a bar, a restaurant, and a nightclub. He surrounded himself with attractive women, and naturally he got first dibs. He became more and more distracted by the pleasure palace he constructed around himself. He was sure to get sloppy amid all the carousing. 1975. The disco craze had begun. While marijuana and LSD had been the substances of choice for acid rock, Cocaine was the official drug of disco. It enabled one to keep their energy up so they could dance all night. For all who were employed in the manufacture, distribution, and sales of cocaine, cash piled up to the stratosphere. July 1976, July 4th, marked America's bicentennial year, and the nation celebrated coast to coast. In New York City, historic ships were due to appear in the harbor. Griselda and her cartel would take advantage of this event to import their own contribution to the culture of the United States of America. It was Alberto who rowed Colombia's tall ship, Gloria, in tribute to the Santa Maria, which had been steered by Christopher Columbus. The landing wasn't quite as glorious as Alberto and Griselda anticipated. Agents representing the DEA were waiting for them. Alberto managed to escape. He met up with Griselda and their assistants and loaded the cocaine into vans. They drove to New York's Latino neighborhood and laid low for the time being. Griselda sent Alberto back to Bogota to clean up the administrative mess that resulted in them nearly getting arrested. In the meantime, priority one was to find out who sold them out to the DEA. Law enforcement was on to Griselda Blanco. There were multiple warrants out for her arrest. She was left with no choice but to return to Colombia. Back to the drawing board. Griselda had had it with Alberto. His hard partying ways led to carelessness. It also almost led to her living the rest of her life in prison. When she arrived at his hacienda, she had a special present in wait for him. When they greeted each other, she presented with a well-rehearsed smile. Alberto, I learned that you had trouble in New York. Griselda, yes, I had to leave, but not without getting the money that I put aside, thankfully. In fact, I brought it. Alberto walked toward her in heightened anticipation of getting his greedy hands on more bundles of cash. Alberto, and there is a lot? Griselda, yes, there's got to be a few million, and half is for you. Alberto advanced closer to her. Griselda, but more than that, I brought a personal gift so that you don't forget me ever. Griselda pulled her gun out of her handbag and emptied all 6 chambers into Alberto. A gunfight broke out between Alberto's bodyguards and hers. 2 of her bodyguards were shot. She took a shot in the stomach. She was not gravely injured. After she was discharged from the hospital, Griselda went to work reorganizing her operation. The deliveries would be made to Miami. There it would remain in safekeeping by contact of Alberto's until her arrival. No longer would they ship the coke with mules. Now the deliveries would be made by plane and boat. This enabled them to ship larger quantities anyway. 2/3 of the product was delivered to John Gotti in New York. The rest was sold to another organization that was part of Griselda's network. Griselda couldn't have orchestrated it better. Millions of dollars in profits piled up. The only thing that concerned Griselda now was how to launder the money. In the 1980s, American President Ronald Reagan carried out several deregulation initiatives, particularly in the banking sector. So-called bank zones were created. International banking facilities were institutions to which American bankers could lend money to residents of foreign countries while being exempt from numerous taxes. On American shores, the market was deregulated, and states such as Texas, Nevada, and Florida made provisions to attract foreign investment. Griselda took full advantage of this situation. She bought a luxurious penthouse on the floor of a high-rise. By the time she was 40, Griselda was making upwards to $80 million a month. She was tempted to splurge, but she was concerned that decadence could lead to her undoing, as it had with Alberto. She laundered her money with other foreign tax havens and loopholes. A new threat to Griselda's business emerged. After Fidel Castro released scores of political prisoners, most of them washed ashore in Florida. Many of them became involved in the sales and distribution of cocaine. Soon they were doing well enough to compete with the Colombians and Puerto Ricans. Griselda did not welcome competition, and she was determined to show these Chicanos who was the real lord of this world. She dispatched Jorge Ayala to the scene. He was an expert in weapons. He had previously been affiliated with the Colombian army. He had a reputation for being overzealous. His senior officers felt his body count was a little too high. He had even murdered innocent women and children simply because they were aligned politically and personally with the opposition. He even helped to dig mass graves for them. When he met with Griselda, she told him about her concerns. She identified the parties responsible and urged him to take care of them, ASAP. He told her he preferred to act alone and that he would need a budget to purchase all the tools of the trade. Approval was granted. He was informed he would receive a bonus for every corpse. The first victims of this assignment to find themselves within the crosshairs of Jorge Ayala were called the Marielitos. They were Cuban refugees living in the neighborhood of Little Havana. They were known for their involvement in the cocaine trade and for tattooed tears at the corners of their right eyes. Some of them were so brazen they sold coke on the street. Others were more discreet, dealing in bars. At the end of Ayala's first week in Miami, he had killed 11 of the Marielitos. Cops and criminals alike filled cemeteries like never before, equalized by avarice and murder. In some incidents, so many people were murdered in a matter of minutes that the police chief rented refrigerated trucks that had been used by Burger King to transport the corpses. The gunshot homicide rate had tripled. Miami's media compared the Miami of the 1980s to the Chicago of the 1920s. Griselda Blanco and her ilk became known as the Cocaine Cowboys. Common denizens of Miami became uneasy with this development, especially since it was not just relegated to one troubled, crime-infested neighborhood. Like inclement weather, a flurry of bullets could saturate the atmosphere at any moment and in broad daylight, anywhere. Griselda had cleaned house. All rivals and competition were flushed off the streets of Miami. The entire city was her turf when it came to the sales of cocaine. The millions continued to stack up. By this point, her personal fortune was estimated to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 billion. Now that she felt secure, she could finally relax and enjoy life. She decided to have a taste of her product to see what the fuss was all about. Like with so many others, this became a habit. She hired a Cuban masseur who became her lover. Persuaded by him, she began to host large, lavish pleasure parties. The atmosphere was saturated with disco music and bowls of cocaine. One of the negative side effects of the cocaine was paranoia. To prevent dissension among her associates, she gave more power and autonomy to Jorge Ayala. He was to lean on her subordinates to increase profits, what is known in a political party as a whip. Those who did not meet their sales quotas would suffer tragic consequences. Griselda severed her ties with the masseur after catching him flirting with a stripper. She met a new hidalgo named Dario Sepulveda. He was a Colombian trafficker based in the United States. He was sent by associates in Colombia to learn from the woman who was by then dubbed the Queen of Cocaine. Their chemistry was so strong that they almost immediately became lovers. He moved into her penthouse and got her pregnant. She was a fan of the movie The Godfather and decided to name her infant son Michael Corleone in tribute. Griselda and Dario got married. Eventually, Dario got homesick. He also feared the day when the American government's agents would come rushing through the door to arrest them both. Griselda promised him that they would never have a better life anywhere else on Earth. Colombia had been the setting of so many upsetting memories, so she didn't miss it much. Eventually, the marriage disintegrated. Dario asked for a divorce. She agreed to a divorce under one condition, explained to him in these terms: "If you walk out of my life, you better move away from me, because I can't bear to see you making out with another woman." Dario decided to move to Colombia, but he didn't want to return empty-handed. One day he left the penthouse. He told Griselda he was taking Michael to the mall to buy him a present. Griselda was suspicious. She said, "If you're not back in 2 hours, I send my dogs after you, asking them to rip your balls off." Dario was not intimidated. As soon as he left the building, he went straight to the airport and flew back to Bogota. 2 hours later, his husband and son had not returned. Griselda was furious. She called Jorge Ayala and asked him to search for them. Blinded by rage, Griselda smashed every object in the apartment that belonged to Dario. Resigning herself to this situation, she decided that a day would come when she would punish him. She didn't just want him to die. She wanted him to suffer and beg her for forgiveness. He wouldn't get it, but she wanted to see him plead for mercy nonetheless. Griselda had many associates in Bogota. One day while Dario was in his car, a fake police officer checked his identification before killing him. Michael was not harmed. He was put on a plane back to Miami. She was overjoyed to bring Michael back into her fold again. Griselda met another man who would become her lover. His name was Robert Palumbo. Her understanding was he was a drug dealer. What she didn't know was that he was living a double life as a narcotics agent. To prevent any suspicion on her part, he would snort cocaine with her. One day during a shopping trip, Griselda was under surveillance by narcotics officers. She was also being followed by narcotics traffickers. Griselda made some enemies in the trafficking trade. Jamie Bravo was one of Alberto's nephews. He and some accomplices jumped out of a van with the intention of killing Griselda. She had killed one of Alberto's nieces. She owed Griselda $500,000. Robert Palumbo intervened at just the right time, and there was a gunfight. Now she knew that the feds were onto her, though it hardly came as a shock. When she returned home, she collected all the cash she hid in a safe. The next step was to find a place to hide. Before she left the apartment, she called Jorge Ayala. She briefed him on their new reality. "Now you're the boss of the network, but I ask you to pay me 10% of what you earn. Another thing, beware, because the cops are on our tracks. And finally, I ask you to take care of my son and take him to a place where he will not be threatened. Because I'm sure that those who wanted to kill me are going to come at him to force me out of my hole. I shall contact you when I shall be undercover. I'll tell you where to send my son and give him a travel bag with money that comes back to me. Vaya con Dios," Spanish for Godspeed. Griselda took a train to Tampa with one piece of luggage. It wasn't a week's worth of clothing. The bag contained $2 million in cash. After arriving in Tampa, she took a bus to New Orleans and then on to Houston, Texas. From there, she took a plane to Los Angeles. It was where her mother lived. Anna was living her life above board. She had a green card and was living in the suburb of Irvine, which featured a large Hispanic community. Anna was reluctant to open her door to Griselda. She had become a born-again Christian. Griselda had to figure out how she was going to sell herself as worthy of Anna's alms. Anna conveniently forgot that she forced her daughter into prostitution when she was only 12 years old. Griselda presented her pitch. "We know, you and me, how it is hard for a woman in Colombia to know happiness. I've watched over you, mother, as I have watched over my 3 boys that I was forbidden to see. I made sure they never experience hunger, and I think I managed. Since the day when my first husband threw me out, I swore that never, never again I won't let a man manage my life." After a 30-minute conversation, Anna agreed to let Griselda in. She could move in, but under certain conditions. Anna lived a quiet life and would not tolerate illegal activity in her home. Griselda wrapped her arms around Anna and said, "Never, mother, never will I bring any harm to you. You too suffered in your life, so I will not add to the misfortune." A month later, Griselda felt settled, knowing that she hadn't been followed. She placed a call to Jorge Ayala. She made arrangements for Michael to join her and Anna in Los Angeles. Michael arrived with a suitcase that contained $10 million in cash. They lived in peace and comfort for a time, but Griselda's past was about to catch up with her. Robert Palumbo met with a man named Jamie Bravo, whose life was in danger due to a threat posed to him by the Medellin cartel. Bravo's life was spared due to the Witness Protection Program. By having been placed in the program, he was obligated to cooperate with law enforcement. He told Palumbo that Griselda's mother lived in California, though he didn't know the city in which she resided. Palumbo decided that the best city to search for her was Los Angeles, since it had the largest population of Latinos in the state. February 20th, 1985. Roberto Palumbo, leading a team of DEA and FBI agents, arrived at Anna's bungalow in the middle of the night. They used a battering ram to smash through all doors and windows. Once she was brought outside, cuffed, and read her rights, she said to an agent, "Who is your chief?" The man, Robert Palumbo, said, "It's me. It's been a while that I'm on your tracks, you know. I almost have you in New York 10 years ago, but I had to wait. Today it's me. You're lucky." Griselda leaned forward and kissed him on the mouth. Naturally, none of them expected this gesture. She said to Palumbo, "After having managed to escape in New York, I swore to my ex-husband to kiss on the mouth the one who would handcuff me. It's done. I kept the promise I made him." While in custody of the LAPD, Griselda was interrogated. She denied all allegations. They asked her about the bundles of money they found. She said it was her and her mother's life savings. Meanwhile, her arrest became a media sensation, especially in Miami. Just because Griselda was incarcerated didn't mean she was harmless. When she found out that her son Osvaldo had been killed, she placed a bounty on the heads of those who were determined to be responsible. Not only were they identified and located, but in accordance with Griselda's instructions, their bodies were cut into pieces and littered alongside a road. Just a little reminder to everyone that Griselda Blanco was not to be fucked with. A major event in the history of the Latin cocaine cartels occurred on December 2nd, 1993. Pablo Escobar was cornered by police and killed. This threw the entire cocaine trafficking world into a tailspin. It didn't help that civil war was underway in that part of the world for years. Another development that threatened the cartels was that a new operation, the so-called Cali cartel, was producing tons of the product. Every mafia family in the world that sold cocaine was desperate for new suppliers. Jorge Ayala was arrested after being given up by informants with links to the Cali cartel. For his participation in drug trafficking alone, he faced 30 years in prison. He also faced charges for the murders of 120 people. His likelihood of leaving prison in a body bag was looking more and more probable. Because he was such an integral figure in Griselda Blanco's empire, he was offered a plea deal. If he gave up information about his network, he would be placed in the Witness Protection Program. He would not be charged with anything, and he would live under a new identity. Ayala mulled this over for less than a minute. He was a fountain of incriminating information. He began by giving the names of all the men who worked for him. Griselda Blanco was doomed. 1999. Griselda Blanco's trial began. She was extradited to Miami, where she faced the death penalty for 3 murders she orchestrated. She was later extradited to Colombia to face charges she incurred there. Her wealth and power in her home country kept her out of prison, as it had for others involved in the cartels. September 3rd, 2012, Griselda left her heavily protected house for the first time in months to go shopping. She was walking on a sidewalk toward a butcher's shop when a motorcycle bearing the weight of 2 men pulled up. She was shot twice in the head. She got the death penalty after all. Griselda Blanco was an innovator in her field. Her techniques for smuggling cocaine and carrying out executions were groundbreaking and are utilized today. The Colombian government has hypothesized that she was responsible for a minimum of 250 murders. She is considered to be one of the most dangerous women who ever lived. She is also the first woman to become a billionaire criminal. Even most male kingpins did not achieve her level of wealth and power during her reign. Griselda Blanco was diminutive in stature, standing at only 5 feet. However, as a player in the cocaine trafficking syndicate, she still looms over those who would have been murdered today if they had dared to displace her as one of the titans of the industry. Thank you for listening to Human Monsters. Bye for now.